Hey everybody, welcome to the third episode of the Senate Update. Your hosts, I'm MangryGamer, and I'm joined by LabMonkey.
Hey everyone.
How you doing, Lab?
I'm doing well tonight. Thanks for asking.
Cool, man. Well, how do you feel about talking about guild store store currencies and doing a little guide for that?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I've seen a lot of questions recently in just our community chat for different, even different players in different spots in their journey. So I think it's always good to have a solid foundation, know exactly what you're looking for in each of the stores and what are kind of the best deals and what are the ones to kind of stay away from if you want to be at least somewhat efficient. So yeah, let's talk about each of these stores.
All right, man. Cool. So what we'll do is we'll kind of go through the stores in the order that they come up in the store tab in game, and then we'll kind of talk about a couple other miscellaneous items afterwards, mostly ally points and things like that. So let's get into it then. So first up, we have our normal shipment store. So I know what I normally do is the first thing I always usually just buy up whatever gear pieces are just 200 or I think they're all 2,700 credits. There might be a couple that are cheaper, but for the most part, the first four pieces are always just straight credits. I buy them just because sometimes you need them for low level gear pieces as well as down the line if you need to convert relic mats and things like that, and they're cheap as hell. So I just buy those out of reflex. Largely avoid everything else early on, maybe Shock T or Bosk, particularly if you're not doing hyperdrive. For Bosk, Shock T is still a pain in the ass to unlock and takes a while anyway. Those are kind of the only two that, even if you are spending crystals on those, probably just unlock them and then wait till you get to their node and farm them proper. That's kind of my approach. Obviously, there's impulse purchases that I buy out of there, like stun guns and other things if I just get impatient and want to see a gear level go up. But what's your approach there, Lab?
Sure. So I do the same thing that you do in regard to the first four slots that are credits. I just buy them regardless of what they are. Every now and then, there's a tab that lets you buy 3 of those Mark III holo projector salvage for credits, which is just a fantastic deal. You never want to miss that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything else is kind of meh. You're going to end up getting a bunch of them. But as you said, even for the items where you have an overabundance, you're going to be able to convert them into relic materials. So it's always a good idea to spend a pittance of credits to increase your stash. As far as other things out of that shop, um, let me first say the disclaimer that different people are going to have different income levels in this game. If you're taking first place in both arenas every day, then you're going to have a lot of crystals that you may want to use to purchase some gear. Um, if you're not taking first in arenas both days, you probably, for the most part, going to want to stay away from this shop outside of those 4 credit purchases. Um, just because your credits are going to be, or your crystals are going to be much more efficiently used on refreshes for farming gear and character shards rather than purchasing them out of the store. But with that said, if you are buying gear, if you do have a decent supply of crystals, either from real money or from in-game income, then the Mark V stun gun prototype is pretty cheap compared to other gear of its kind. So I would recommend buying that one. Um, Sometimes Chirotechs. I would probably stay away from characters. It's just not a good value. The exception being Bosk, being able to unlock him early for a jumpstart in Fleet Arena. And I've been rambling a little bit here, but I did want to question you. Why is it? Why did you specifically list Shock T as one of your potential purchases early on? Is it just because
So
I
largely
understand that
because
getting
of
to her node is bad, but it's tough. But what does she give you that you need to unlock her so early?
So she just gives you a good clone lead. Certainly, you can just go Rex and do a full-on clone team, or put in Ahsoka, or maybe R2 or somebody like that with a clone team, and use that until Shaak Ti. That's certainly a viable option. I do like Shaak Ti as a lead, even at low star levels, as long as you gear her well. I do feel like she performs well, and it can give you a kind of a jump start in arena. I also had a guy in Tatooine who actually did that. Like, he between staying on top of his arena and maintaining his clones, is actually what he used to stay on top. He would basically dump all his crystal income into Shaak Ti. That's how he farmed her up primarily, and it worked out really well. Now, he did whale a little bit too, but partially for funsies. I do like Shaak Ti's character. Like I said, even if you're focusing clones, you can perform certainly perfectly well with Rex as a lead, and do a variety of lineups there, even if you're doing 501st. But Shaak Ti is an option if you do want to unlock her as take it up a notch for a bit.
Okay, so I mean that makes sense to me. I would say if you're going clones as your very first team, then unlocking Shaak Ti even at low stars, that makes sense because her lead is better than Rex's in arena, in my opinion. But outside of that, I'd probably just wait until my fleet was strong enough to be able to farm her out of the node, because it gets expensive pretty quickly, and you want to be able to use those early crystals as efficiently as possible.
Agreed. Yeah, it really only do that if you're maining clones as your primary team.
Yeah,
I totally agree there. Yeah, Bossk obviously has utility in a bounty hunter team, but also is going to be a key ship with Houndstooth. So that is probably the one that I would go with before Shaak Ti.
Yes,
Again,
100%.
unless you're maining clones.
All right, cool. So you want to move on to the weekly shipment tab then?
Sure.
All right. So this one, before we get into it, I lovingly refer to this tab as the whale mart,
Yes.
because it really just pages upon pages of crystal purchases, and I think we're both going to agree that for the majority of players, you're probably just going to end up ignoring the shop.
Yeah, this is the one where everybody tells you don't waste your crystals, but then when you question them on it, they're like, well, yeah, I've gotten impatient and certainly bought gear out of there with crystals. So it's very much an impulse store. Like, if you're really getting impatient and trying to like upgrade a team, we're all guilty of buying stuff out of here. But generally speaking, I avoid pretty much everything. On occasion, if I have a huge stockpile of ally points and I just don't have the time to click through a bunch of bronziums, which we'll get to that a little bit later. But sometimes I will buy. There's usually a node in there for ally points, and it does rotate. Usually, like stun guns or maybe Cairo are probably the ones that I would go with if you are going to do that option. But everything else is pretty much crystals in there, I think. So generally avoid it. But if you are going to buy stuff out of there, make sure it's like bottleneck gear early on. Obviously, if you guys aren't rocking heroic raids across the board and doing GOTB and stuff like that, focus on the gear pieces that you're really not getting super often from guild events is what I would say.
So there are a couple of things and of notes that everybody should be aware of from this tab, whether they buy anything from it or not. The first one is that CG put in the first three purchases are available for 5 character shards that rotate every week. Well, at least they refresh every week. They rotate more like every month. But you can get 5 character shards for 1 million credits. And I would say, for the most part, it's not really that great of a deal. If it's a hard node farm character, then I would think about getting it if you haven't maxed that character already, because hard nodes are kind of a bitch to farm. Other places where they're easier to get, I would probably not purchase them. Maybe guild store only characters like Dengar or Logray. If they showed up, I would buy them there. But generally speaking, you're going to want the credits for checking mods and for leveling up your characters more than you're going to want to spend for 5 shards.
Yeah, especially early on too. Like credit, like I'm just now to the point on both my accounts where like I'm comfortably saving credits because I don't have anything that I'm pressuring myself to level up or increase mod levels. But when you're like pre 1 million GP, like you're scraping up every last credit you can find to upgrade that stuff. So I don't think I
Yeah.
ever bought anything out of there for the 5 shards. Maybe once or twice, but that's about it.
I think I bought something once or twice, just like you. But generally, I try to avoid it, just because, like you said, especially early on. I mean, I'm still to the point. I'm almost 3 million GP, and I'm still to the point where I'm scraping for credits just because I do check a lot of mods. Like I do 3 mod refreshes every day, so that's where a lot of my credits end up going. Is to mods and for players who try to stay at the top of the meta or at the top of Grand Arena or try to basically, I mean, once you get a bunch of teams, you need a bunch of good mods to put on them or else they're just mediocre. So credits are, especially since they stopped doing the credit heist every 1 or 2 weeks, and now they're doing it monthly. It seems like they're really
That damn thing's all over the place.
yeah, I know.
We're so inconsistent with that.
They are. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is don't be loose with your credits. The credits are important. And if you have a bunch of credits piling up, it's probably because you're not checking as many mods as you should. So
Guilty.
there's a couple more things in this store that I wanted to mention. The Carbonis and the stun cuffs are more expensive to buy than stun guns. So if you're looking to purchase gear out of this store, you should prioritize buying stun guns. Try to stay away from Carbonis and cuffs if you can, because there are several other stores where you can get them, and they end up being a lot cheaper. I mean, Carbonis you even get out of the challenges. I know
Yeah.
that every character needs multiple Carbonis. I get that. But between the challenges and the guild store, which we're going to start talking about here pretty soon, you shouldn't really. There's going to be other bottlenecks that you're going to have to get through. Carbonti shouldn't be a priority for you for crystals. And same with stun cuffs. Those things you need to buy those cheaply out of the guild token store rather than more expensive in some of these other stores, in my opinion, as far as efficiency goes.
Agreed.
The other thing is those Mark 8 biotech implants, the ones that I affectionately refer to as black basketballs. So they're the black prototype component to the yellow eyeballs that come out of the challenge. Those are a really good deal for crystals. You can get 50 of them for 750 crystals, which is enough for a full piece. It's a really solid deal. You don't get those a lot out of raids. That's where you do get them otherwise. But if you're going to make crystal purchases with gear, that's one of the best things to buy.
My finger was hovering over that buy button on that piece the other day, actually.
Yeah. And then the other note that for people who are buying things for crystals again out of this shop, Kairos and finisher pieces. So by finisher pieces, I mean the injector cell, the injector handle, the things that are the last part of the piece to push you to gear 13. Those two things have the same drop rates if you farm them with normal energy, but the finisher pieces are more expensive than the Kairos. So what that means is that if you're using any of your normal energy to farm these pieces, you need to prioritize farming the finisher pieces with your energy. And if you need to purchase with crystals, then buy the Kairos. The Kairos are 1,400 for 50 of them, and the finishers are 1,750 for 50 of them. So you save 250 crystals. I'm sorry, 350 crystals per finisher piece if you farm it that way.
See, this is why LabMonkey is the brains of this operation, because he actually crunches all these numbers. So I'm going to keep that in mind.
Very good. All right, that's all I have to say about the weekly shipment tab. So,
okay, cool. So next up is Cantina. I don't think either one of us really have too much dissension of opinions on this one. But my top picks are Ahsoka, Boba, and potentially first order officer if you're going for first order early. The order there can vary, but even if you're not going like a Galactic Republic team under Padme with Ahsoka, you're still going to want to farm her for getting Yoda. And even she's useful in even a Jedi team under Basti. So she should be one of the top priorities. I would say between either her or Boba. I typically go her then Boba. And then Boba obviously is just a pretty much a required tune. You need him for a bounty hunter team. He's even if you're not doing straight BH for scoundrel team out of the gate, he's just a solid all around scoundrel, as well as has a pretty solid early tank ship. So definitely those two. 5s, first order officer, depending on what you're farming first and what teams you're building first, they're both useful. And the rest of the tunes are basically situational. Not to say that they're not good tunes. It's just it depends on what you're prioritizing first. Is what I would choose out of the other ones. The big nopes for me are Pow, Bistan, Mob Enforcer, and Jedi Guardian. I think are the main ones. I probably missed one or two. Yeah, anything in the between of those top and bottom, I think are still useful tunes. Choppers in there, Daka's in there, a few others. To me, there are a lot of, you can make a case for any of those. It just depends on what you're building first.
Yep, so I agree with you. And any of the characters that aren't firmly in the nope category, you definitely are going to need to farm them at some point. So it's just a matter of what you prioritize. And that really depends on what your farming path is. So I agree. Ahsoka, 5s, and Boba, those are your 3 biggest important characters. And then after that are situational first order officer, Daka. The other thing that I would add to that list would be Cassian's U-Wing for a couple reasons. The first is because it's just generally a great ship. The reinforcement is really great for Rebel fleets, for Millennium Falcon, and it's pretty good for even other fleets, such as the Finalizer fleet. Just as a buff clear and then an assist call, it's really good. So definitely you're going to want to end up farming that one. And then the other reason that you want to farm that is because ships actually give an increased rate of shard shop currency versus characters. So once you've kind of maxed out your Cantina store characters, all the ones that you're going to farm, you're just going to want to buy Cassian U-Wing shards over and over again because it's the most efficient way to get shard shop currency from that store.
And when we get talking about Galactic War, I'm assuming the whole same would hold true for Galactic War. Once you get the key things that you have, if you have the option of buying, shard shop currency, probably go with the ship, right?
It does, and one interesting thing about these 2 stores is that Cassian's U-Wing specifically is great to buy because it's available in packs of 5 shards, and of course the characters are also available in packs of 5 shards. When you purchase from the Galactic War store, however, the ships are available in packs of 4 shards.
Yeah.
Now, because of the increased rate, the ship actually still comes out ahead with 4 shards versus 5 character shards, but it's only by one shard shop currency, I think. But Cassian U-Wing is firmly in first because it gives 5 shards. So
I totally forgot it did that. I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
Just one more note before we move on from the Cantina store. In addition to your big nope categories, you said Pal, Bistan, Mob Enforcer, and Jedi Knight Guardian. I'd also add Stormtrooper. The only reason you would farm Stormtrooper is if you were in a time crunch to unlock R2 and you needed that 5th Empire. But now that he's in the Journey Guide, that's not even a thing. So don't get Stormtrooper. He sucks. And then I'd probably add Jawa Scavenger to that as well. And again, it's a game, so if you really want to make a Jawa team, go for it. But as far as efficiency goes, as far as getting good banners in Grand Arena, as far as getting a decent return on your gear, Jawas are just not the team that you want to go for in really any sense of the word. So
Yeah.
I would avoid the Jawas. I wouldn't waste any gear on them or any credits leveling them. So I would add him to the list. And then for non-characters, I would also include the ability mats and the training droids. You're going to have an abundance of both of those things. Don't spend your currency on either of those. Even early game, you don't need to.
Totally agree on that. You know, and the Jawas, unless you want to see some bugs go click click boom, which is satisfying, but unless you want to do that, totally agree. It's just such a narrow focus that you would use those on that. I didn't include them in my nope lists in any of these stores because I'm kind of guilty of farming them myself just for fun. But for efficiency, I agree. Don't in any of these stores, don't buy the Jawas. Back in the day, it's funny when you look at old school rosters, like you used to have Jawas. So like for anybody who's a lower level account, if you're looking at upper level accounts and you see these nasty Jawa teams and decide to build those, keep in mind you used to have Jawas. I think for mods. Correct me if I'm right. This might have been before your time.
It was the crit damage mod sets that you had to have Jawas to farm.
Yeah, so nowadays you don't need that at all. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at some old school rosters. That's why those are there. You don't actually need them. They are useful for killing bugs, not efficiently, but they will do the job. So just keep that in mind. All right. Anything else on that store? Lab?
Nope. Let's move on to the guild token store.
Cool. Tokens. So I think the two that always come up in conversation for anybody that I've taken advice from, and typically what I dish out advice are Dengar and Logray. Dengar's a really solid bounty hunter, and Logray is mandatory pretty much for the 3PO event. So you definitely want him for the Ewoks. Logray in particular, I find, but both of them, they don't show up every refresh in that store. So when they're there, you always want to have tokens on hand to buy them because they are very long haul farms. Like Logray, I don't care if you're not building Ewok straight out of the gate. I don't care. Buy it anyway because one day you're going to be like, hey, I need that golden god. Oh, shit. Logray's there and I don't have anything farmed for him. Don't be that guy. Start farming him early. Get him to 7 stars before you get everybody else to 7 stars. That's perfectly fine. Just do it early. Just start now.
Yeah. You definitely have to be forward thinking on the Logray farm for sure. And I was fortunately I had read up on I had seen plenty of comments on Reddit back when I was only a couple months in, bemoaning the fact that they had waited too long for their Logray farm. So I did farm him pretty early. I would say when you start farming Wicket on his hard node, start buying shards for Logray in the shop. You don't have to prioritize him right out of the gate because you'll want to get some gear and stuff. But when you start farming Wicket, that's going to be your cue to start buying Logray out of the shop.
And Dengar is a little bit like you can get around him, but it's not ideal if you don't have Dengar in your bounty hunter team. So he's another one I would definitely do early on if you can, even if you're not prioritizing bounty hunters out of the gate. He's not a bounty hunter pilot, but makes that team so much better.
Yep. If you're gonna be running Bosk League at all, which you will be, then you need Dengar. His AoE is just too good. It heals everybody. It does a bunch of damage. He calls assists. He prevents stealths, so he makes the Chewbacca event a lot easier. He should be your 5th bounty hunter. So yeah, buy him.
And then generally speaking, the tunes that are in the guild store, from my perspective, are all relatively situational. I do like farming the clones out of there as well as in fleet, just to speed that along. I feel like, particularly in the early game in this environment, you do want to build clones relatively early because they're good in all 3 raids. Even in Sith raid, they're good in all 4 phases. They're pretty much the only team that can say that. So I do like farming clones up as quickly as possible. Some people will just do out of fleet, but I like buying them early. The rest are fairly situational. Like certainly if you're trying to speed along a farm for First Order or Ewoks, Pablu shows up there for Ewoks as well as Masked Kylo shows up there. I think B2 shows up there. So there are some situational ones that show up there depending on the teams that you're trying to build up quickly in the beginning. But for the most part, early on, I keep it minimal with tunes, and I focus on gear just to gear up your top teams as quickly as you can, and then kind of shift. Once you're done with those critical key tunes, shift towards heavy on the gear, and then only as needed for situational tunes after that.
So I mostly agree with that. I think that I would take an even more gear heavy approach and say just Dengar and Logray. And if you're, with the caveat that if you start with clones as your starting team, then obviously you need to farm them up as quickly as possible. So go ahead and buy them out of the guild store. I think if you're not starting with clones, then you have ample time to purchase them out of the fleet store and to save the guild tokens for gear. I think buying gear out of that shop is by far the most efficient use of those tokens. And most of the characters in there you either don't need or you don't need badly enough to sacrifice gear for. So, for instance, young Han and Stark. Both of those characters are decent and they do have niches to fill. But, I mean, for me, I'm almost 3 million character GP, or not character, 3 million total GP. But I haven't farmed either of those up because I don't have either of their teams. They're kind of more luxury teams. So even though the characters themselves are good, if you're not going to build the team around them, then there's no use spending the tokens to buy them. So,
Great.
Yeah, just Dengar and Logray, and then get gear. Buy Carbantes and stun cuffs primarily out of this shop because they're by far the best deal, and you need them for literally every single character. So you're going to need a buttload of them.
Yeah.
So
buy
them.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of tokens and you don't know what to buy Carbantes and stun cuffs.
And if they don't show up, save it because they will show up.
Yes. Yep.
Before we move on to the next story, since you brought up Stark, I do want to give a quick PSA for Stark because this is a big trip up for beginner players now. Is they look at old school like pillar systems and stuff like that recommend building Stark in Pillar 1. That's all housed around the idea that you want to be building your Hoth TB teams as quickly as possible, right? And he's very much if you're going to perform at the highest level in Hoth TB, he is a required Imperial Trooper to build out the ideal Imperial Trooper team. So if you're building that team, farm him. But nowadays, I don't recommend building anything specifically for the Hoth TBs. You want to be building forward-thinking towards GOTB rather than focusing on Imperial Troopers that have their use in Hoth TB and certainly can have their counter attacks in GA and TW to make them useful. So I'm not saying they're like just a terrible team, but you don't need them early on like you used to. So I see a lot of players that blindly follow the pillar system thinking they need it for Empire. You don't. It's Imperial Troopers. You don't need Imperial Troopers. Don't farm him.
Agreed.
Unless you really like Imperial Troopers.
Yep. Yeah, you have to commit to building the whole team. Otherwise, don't farm Stark. One other thing that I did want to mention before we go on to Squad Arena is there's another piece of gear besides Carbantes and cuffs that's an insanely good value out of that store. It's the Mark V weapon tech. It's like a green circle looking thing. And you get 5 of them for 100 currency. That is insane value. Most of your characters are going to be requiring multiple Mark V weapon techs. This is the best place to get them. So I usually try to keep a reserve of like 50 of them in my stockpile at all times, and then I'll renew them once I've finished gearing up certain characters and see that my stock is low again. It really only takes like one raid's worth of currency to get them back up to 50 or so. So look for those weapon techs. Those are really good value. Farm those.
Call. I don't tend to focus on anything that's not purple. So that's a good selection.
There's very few pieces of gear that are worth buying that are not purple, but that's one of them. Maybe the only one. I'm not sure.
Great. All right, cool. So next up is Squad Arena. So for me, my top picks were Kanan, Mace, Tarkin, and Akbar. So the latter three of those are all capital ship captains. So that priority list is not necessarily meant to be order. So I would say if you're going a DS fleet right out of the gate, maybe you slide Tarkin in there in between one or two of those Jedi. I do like the Jedi straight up out of the gate because of Yoda, mostly. But certainly the latter three of those are also capital ship captains, so they're useful for their own ship challenges as well as for whatever fleet you're building for Arena. Which, generally speaking, I usually go dark side because you want to build your ship ability challenges, so focus on Tarkin first. But to each their own. So whichever fleet you're building first, I would say focus on that one. And then the big avoids are Ugnut, Cup. So of course, Underworld Police, ETH Koth. You hear people talk about like how Mace is underwhelmingly not good, or Jedi Guardian. You don't hear anybody talk about ETH Koth, and it's for a good reason. Don't buy him. Savage Opress, I would also lump into there. He's not necessarily a bad tune, from what I hear. If you have the right Sith team built up around it, it's just that team, similar to Stark. If you're not going to build that whole team, don't build him. And I also don't think that team is worth building at all remotely in the early or mid games,
Or even late games. He sucks. Don't buy him.
Yeah, and similar situation with Sidious, in my opinion. I have heard you should have a chat with Psycho Lab because he'll talk to you about Savage.
I know. It's just
I'm with you. I'm with you on it, but there are people that will get up on their boxes on the Sith.
Well, I think a lot of it is just for nostalgia reasons, like because they like him as a character in the cartoon, and then also he was actually pretty good at an earlier stage of the game when power creep hadn't reared its ugly head quite to this extent. But for nowadays, I mean, there are 150 characters that you should gear up first before SWGOH. So yeah, don't farm him. He's not worth your time or your gear.
So that's my list. You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, let me add Chief Nebbit to your avoid list because he's another Jawa, and the Jawas, as we've already discussed, are not worth getting unless you're just doing for funsies. In which case, why are you even listening to this podcast? Come on now. Then I would say IG-88. He's really not a very good character, but you do need to unlock him at least because of his ship. So I would just buy enough tokens to unlock him and then just leave him there. Mine is still like that at level 1, and I've got a 7-star Millennium Falcon, so you don't really need him other than unlocking him so that you can buy the ship. And then Greedo's in there. A lot of people have Greedo on their bounty hunter teams, and honestly, Greedo sucks. Like the only thing about Greedo that's good, in my opinion, is he's really good for that Embo phase 1 of the heroic Sith raid team. If you've got really good bounty hunters, if they're all gear 12 and above, and of course Greedo is expensive to gear too, so keep that in mind. But Greedo is kind of a required 5th in that particular team in order to get really good scores. But since there are teams like you can literally you can kill the entire raid with one team now that Galactic Legends have come out. So he's kind of he's kind of been out power crept even in that particular niche role. But he's squishy. He doesn't do a lot of damage. He dies too easily, even under boss lead. There's just better bounty hunters. So I wouldn't. I made the mistake of wasting some gear and all of my Squad Arena tokens on him. Don't do that. Don't be like me. Don't buy Greedo. He's not very good.
I eventually farmed him up later on, but yeah, I totally agree. He's very RNG dependent too, so he can, but we'll tell you he can shell out a shit ton of damage if he's chaining up those 6+ attacks in one go if he keeps on critting.
Yeah, you know who else shells out a lot of damage? Django, Boba, Embo.
Yeah.
There's so many other bounty hunters that are just better at that.
Things that they're much more consistent too. So it's there's better choices. But if you are speed farming, up a bounty hunter team, but otherwise no.
Yep. And then the only other note that I have for this store is you want to prioritize all those characters that are worth farming. I mean, we didn't mention Stormtrooper Han or Princess Leia, but you need them, obviously, to get Commander Luke Skywalker, so you're going to farm them at some point. So make sure you're farming all the characters that don't suck. But after that, you're going to have a choice, and that's either to purchase Prestige, which is the token that you need to increase capital ship abilities, or buying characters that you already have 7-starred in order to get more shard shop currency. And neither of those is wrong, and I've been doing both of them. But now, I think with the new capital ships that have come to the game recently, and CG's latest Q&A, they've said that they're going to be prioritizing, they're going to be talking about, multiple ship zones and defenses in Grand Arena. And I imagine if, whatever new game mode they're working on now, I'm sure that ships are going to be a component to it. So you're going to want to get a lot of that prestige. You're not going to be able to get enough of it passively, even over the course of a year or two from just the fleet challenges. You're going to have to buy some out of that store. So just kind of do the Squad Arena store dance that I do, and kind of alternate between prestige and shard shop currency as you need either one of them.
And that's something that I should start doing, because I'm starting to see that same bottleneck now that I have Negotiator up and running, that I'm trying to get like some of his or some of that ship's abilities leveled up. But also now they're all of a sudden between both the GOTBs and then also the two new capital ships that are just through events, they've doubled the population of capital ships. And it does seem like they do have a renewed focus of they're playing around with ideas of pilotless or crewless ships and things like that. It seems like they're trying to find ways to churn out more ships. So I agree with you that I think that, there's more and more ship content coming our way. So that's a good call.
Yep. All right, you want to move on to the Galactic War store then?
Absolutely. The Galactic War store is the suck store for the most part. There's a few key tunes here, and a whole lot of garbo fluff.
This is the shard shop currency store.
Yeah. Now certainly there, I think both of us are going to highlight some stuff to pick out and some stuff to avoid, just like the other ones. There is a lot of in between. So if you are farming like some situational teams and you need those, we're not saying that everything in the between is bad. But there is a lot of even tunes that I would say are mediocre or kind of luxury tunes in there, even if you are farming them. But there's also some straight up suck. So let's start off with the good first. I mean, I think Cad Bane, solid tune for bounty hunters. You need him for his ship. He has good, control mechanisms in his kit with stuns and things like that. Poggle only if needed. If you are farming his hard node, which you should be, there's 2 hard nodes I think that he has, but the one has IG 2000 on it. You should be farming that for IG's ship for Millennium Falcon. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to get Padme early on and you're farming up geos and Poggle is the long pole in the tent, then farm him out of GW to keep him in parity with the other geos. Otherwise, I recommend just hard node farming him all the way. Because he will also drop from bronziums once in a while too. So if you get lucky, I think you can get 50 stacks of them out of there. So you can get lucky that way. So I would say only do him out of GW if needed. For the most part, yeah. So for the most part, those are the 2 key ones that I like out of there. Other than that, the ships are really good. For the most part, they do help speed things along. You can even get 5 ships in there. The Geo ships show up in there. Clone ships, like I said, I think Sarge shows up a little bit more often than 5s. I don't remember if Rex shows up there. For the most part, the ships that show up there are solid ships for the most part. His ship, avoid Counselor's ship, because neither one of those are really needed at all for anything.
Yep.
The 2 maybe, kind of on the fence if you need them for unlock teams, either Luminara or Phasma. If you're trying to get B8 with First Order or Yoda with the Jedi, farm those 2 up. Phasma, you also need for Galactic Legend Kylo if you ever chase that. But those 2 are really only if you're working on those particular unlock teams. Outside of those unlock teams, there's stronger Jedi than Lumi, and there's stronger First Order than Phasma, particularly with Hux and Lobster Trooper in the mix. So those are kind of my picks and avoids. What about you, Lab?
Yep. So I'm going to go through this store really quickly because it's mostly garbage, but I agree with pretty much everything you said. I would also recommend Biggs and Zeb and K2SO4 out of that shop. Biggs pretty early, I would say, just because of his ship. You're going to want it for your early fleets, whether you're doing light side or dark side. He's really good with target lock. Zeb, obviously, even if you're not starting Phoenix, which I don't really recommend anymore, you're going to want to farm them at some point to get Grand Admiral Thrawn because he's just such a great character. So you're going to need Zeb. And then K2SO4, you at least need to unlock him out of that shop just because he's required for Cassian's U-Wing. I went ahead and took him to 7-star just to give the U-Wing a little bit more oomph, but you don't even have to really do that if you don't want to. But definitely unlock him at least. Other than that, pretty much garbage. Don't ever farm Tusken Raider, IG-86, Dathja is another Jawa, Tebow, Bodhi Rook, and then of course you mentioned the Consular ship and then Wedge's ship. They're not worth farming, so avoid all of those if you can, and just purchase some characters or ships that you've already 7-starred to get charge optimal.
Cool. So next we'll move on to the mod shop. We both kind of have the same opinion on this: is save your currency. Don't buy anything out of there. Just farm the mods.
Yep. Actually, a lot of people are probably going to disagree with this, but if anybody's familiar with Operation Metaverse, they have a really great U channel. They're really strong at not only theory crafting themselves, but also pulling resources from the community. And they did a nice video on this. I'm sure you can find it if you YouTubed it, on why you should pretty much avoid purchasing anything out of the shop, just because it's so much more expensive to get a good mod out of there than it is to farm and slice. You can get multiple god mods for just one mod that you can purchase out of this store, and it's the real reason to avoid this store. It's so expensive. Like spending 2 million ship currency that'll set you back about a week as far as how much ship currency you're getting. it's really the ship currency is brutal. And with more ships coming to the game, you need to hoard that stuff. You can't be spending it on mods. And then 4 million for a gold mod out of that store is just it's so pricey. You can almost level an entire character for 4 million. So it's just I don't know. It's not worth it.
Ironically, the people that will argue with us on that point are the people that are sitting on 4 million GP accounts that have a shit ton of ship currency.
That's true.
That they farmed up all the ships that they needed because there's a lot less ships. Even though, early game players listening to this, they're like, "What the hell do you mean that you have a surplus of ship currency?" Because I mean, I'm sitting at around, my main account's around yours, 3 million. I have never seen a surplus ever of ship currency. I'm always scraping by on that, much more so than regular currency even. So but old school players, they farmed up everything early on and then were racking up ship currency for a long time. So those are the people that are going to argue at that point probably. And they can probably afford to.
Yeah, obviously, if you've got all of your ships leveled already, I would still keep some in the bank just for new releases, and I'm sure that most people do. But if you're sitting on 100 million ship currency and you've got all of the ships leveled, or at least almost all of the ships leveled, then yeah, go ahead and spend some on mods. But for the majority of people listening to this, they're not going to be in that same boat. So,
agreed. So next up is Fleet Shop. So I have a few that I always save 400 currency for that, when they show up, which is not all the time, but when they do show up, you want to save for them. So for me, Slave One, TIE Advanced, as well as Darth Vader, that is his ship, and he is a little bit easier. It speeds up his farm a lot if you buy him out of Fleet Store, as well as use the shards from the achievements that you get along the way through the quest rewards when you're building up, as well as General Grievous. Those are the ones that I always have 400 in the bank for in case they show up, because they don't show up all the time. Buy as credits allow. So as long as you have a stockpile for those purchases, I always recommend buying the Geo ships, as well as the Geos themselves, and then clone ships and clones. Those are all, and obviously prioritized depending on what you're trying to build out of the gate. You don't want to overextend and get too broad and not focusing on one team or another. But those are the ones that show up a lot. The Geos and the clones and their ships, they show up a lot there, so they can be farmed up fairly quickly. And the others are fairly situational, depending on the fleet focus that you're doing. Zeta mats, very yes. Omega is very no. Don't waste your money on that. Zeta mats, a lot of people say that you should be focusing more on Zeta mats to get more Zetas cranked out early on. I tend to focus on whatever I need for my fleets in particular. But I also do spend a decent amount on stuff like clones and things like that, even if I'm not focusing on their fleet. Just because they're a strong squad, and that's the only place to farm most of the clones, bar the guild store, as well as fives you can farm out of the cantina store. So early on, I go heavy on ships and tunes, and then later on, I focus more on Zeta mats. But there's differing opinions on that focus, but I'm kind of reaping the rewards of that now. My main account is I've plowed through most of the useful tunes and ships, aside from some luxury stuff. So now I'm basically just buying choice things like finishing off GG, and then Zeta mats mostly.
So I agree with you. Yeah, I completely agree. You should farm the characters and ships early and the Zetas later. And I agree with your list too. General Grievous, buy him out of fleet. Do not buy him out of shard shop. We'll talk about that a little bit again, but yeah, make sure you save enough currency so you can buy General Grievous when he shows up in this shop, because this is where you need to buy him from. That's pretty much all I had for this particular store, I mean, I'm at the point, like you said, I'm at the point where I've farmed up all of the useful characters and ships now, so I'm just hitting the buy button on the Zeta every day when I have 2,000 currency. So
Awesome. All right. So next up is the Guild Event Store. So, Lab, what's your take on the Guild Event Store? Because this is one that I get questions on all the time, and it seems to be, even amongst veteran players, seems to be a little bit debated.
sure. So I've actually, I mean, I've heard multiple different takes on this particular store, and it definitely depends on what kind of player you are and where you are in the game. So if you are an early player, like 0 to 6 months, then you need to pretend like the store doesn't exist. Just don't even click on the tab, and here's why. Because first of all, if you're 0 to 6 months, you don't have the Guild Event 2 tokens. You only have get 1 from the Hoth TVs and other various achievements. Get 1 is basically CG, the way that they've released their characters. It is now a character only currency for the first couple of years. The reason is because there are 4 characters that you can purchase shards with this currency: Hermit Yoda, Wampa, General Skywalker, and Darth Malak. And 3 of those 4 characters you need to get. Wampa is the luxury. You don't really need to get Wampa. You can also farm Wampa out of Galactic Bounties as well. But Hermit Yoda is extremely useful in multiple game modes. You're going to want him to boost your raid scores early on. You're going to want him for your Jedi team to take down Sep droids in mid and late game, as well as he is currently in almost all of the Jedi counter teams for the new Galactic Legend characters. So Hermit Yoda, some people will say he's a luxury character, and that might technically be true, but it's going to boost your account so much to have him at 7 stars that it's worth putting in the currency, especially early on. Like, he should be your first character out of the store, in my opinion, and you should save all your currency for him. And then, of course, General Skywalker and Darth Malak are both super strong characters, and they both really need to be 7 stars and taken to Relic 7 when you get them. So all of that together is going to cost you about 230,000 of get 1 currency, and that's over a year's worth, well over a year's worth of income on that. It's probably 2 years worth, actually. So there is some really good gear in here: stun guns, stun cuffs, Carbanis, gyros, G12 finishers. There's a lot of good gear in there. But the problem is you can get all of that gear from other stores and other locations. You can only get these characters from this location. So, in my opinion, even the boost that you get from farming gear out of the store early will come to bite you later on when you don't have enough of this currency to get those needed characters. It sucks because you have all this currency and you really want to spend it, but the more disciplined you are about this particular shop, the more reward you're going to reap later on from having these good characters. What are your thoughts, Mangry?
So I'm not going to discount anything that you just said. That said, I take a different approach, and I don't think either one of these approaches is inherently wrong. But I take a much more gear-heavy focus. Totally agree with you on General Skywalker and Malak. 100% agree. Get 2. Don't spend any of that on gear. Save all get 2 for the capital ships. Absolutely. I would say prioritize Negotiator personally, but whichever of the 2 capital ships that are there that you want to go for, I would say just save all of that. You can maybe make a case for Cairo, but you can, like Lab said, you can farm Cairo from a few different places. It sucks to farm it. Nobody likes to farm it, but just farm it. Don't buy it here. Forget 1. I do like the stun guns, the stun cuffs, the Carbantis, particularly early on, because I do feel like especially with the hyperdrive bundle and things like that. If you want to keep up as a free-to-play player, you need every source of gear that you need to stack into characters to keep them up on where they need to be, both for fleet as well as for squad arenas. So that's kind of my case, and really the only differing opinion there is the Hermit Yoda. Hermit Yoda, again, I totally agree on Wampa being luxury. Hermit Yoda is definitely really good tune to have in your Jedi squad. I think you can get by beyond without him. You can do really good, raid scores without him. I do see your point now that we're starting to see some of the counter, videos around the Galactic Legends. Hermit Yoda being, strong in there to give you that, just extra little push to put you over the edge on those. But I still say that the gear early on is really solid. Now that I've probably extended that on my own account too far into my account to the point where I'm pretty close to getting DR, and shortly thereafter I'll get Malik, and I really don't have a stockpile of Get One, so it's going to be a bit before I'll be able to take him to 7-star, and guess. So I would say certainly if you do want Hermit Yoda, absolutely do what Lab is telling you to do, because once you get far enough down the line to the point where you're targeting Malik and General Skywalker, you're not going to have the currency to spend on Hermit Yoda. You're going to be dumping everything you need, and you should be dumping all the currency that you need into Skywalker and Malik over Yoda, in my opinion. But if you're going to do Hermit Yoda, absolutely get him early, because you're not going to want to prioritize that currency later. I do like the gear early on, though, because I do feel like it gives you a little extra catapult to keep you on par, particularly if you're free to play or low spend account.
I will budge a little bit. I do think if you have a significant advantage in the early game that you can push with a little bit of extra gear out of that shop, and as a result you can stay up near the top of your respective arenas, then I would say it's worth buying out of that store. But you really, you have to know that that's what you're getting before you do it, in my opinion. Otherwise it's just best to hoard for Hermit Yoda.
And I will say too, don't half-ass either one of those. Like, if you're gonna get Hermit Yoda, go all in on him. Don't just get him to 4 stars or 5 stars or whatever, because that does you no good at all for raids or even for PvP viability later on. So if you're gonna do Hermit Yoda, go all in on him and get him to 7 stars. Don't have that. Yep.
And yeah, we're both in agreement about Get 2. You need it for the capital ship. Don't spend it on other stuff.
Okay, cool. So next up is Championship Store. So this is the Galactic Arena Championship. So this is all the currency that you get from GAC. I tend to prefer buying battle neck gear out of here, particularly focus on like G12 finishers, things like that. Really the big nope, in my opinion, is GG. Just farm him straight up out of fleet. He's super, super expensive out of the shard store. Or I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here. Championship store. Yeah, I mainly just focus on bottleneck gear and G13, G12 finishers, stuff like that.
Yeah, so for me, what I do out of this store is mostly I buy Kairos. They're the second best deal in the store, and you need a secondary source of Kairos if you're still doing hard node farms, which pretty much all of us still are. So you can't devote all of your normal energy to farming them, so you need a secondary source, and for me, this is it. The Mark V droid collars are an okay value if you're gear crunched on them, specifically if you're in the middle of gearing teams that really want a lot of them. Looking at you, Treya. But the very best value out of this store, in my opinion, is the Mark II pulse modulators. If you're not familiar with what those are the little yellow spinny disc things that are used to take your mods from 5 dot to 6 dot. And I'm a broken record, but if you want to win in this game, if you want to beat other players in the various game modes, you need better mods. And this particular, this is by far the best value in terms of buying these materials. And so I know it hurts to not purchase Kairos and other D12 finisher pieces with this currency, but this is going to be your edge against other players if you have more 6 dot mods than they do. So this is, between these and Kairos, that's pretty much exclusively what I buy out of this store.
So, Lab, where else do those Mark II pulse modulators?
Yep.
Like, where else can you farm?
Yeah, good question. You cannot farm them. You can only buy them. And excluding crystal purchases, there are 2 other shops where they appear. You can get them out of the guild token store, and you can get them out of the shard shop currency store. And they are both, you don't get very many of them out of either stores. And so this particular store, the GAC store, is by far the best deal in terms of the amount of currency that you spend for what you get. So yeah, you could forego gear out of the guild token store and buy them at I think you can get them 2 at a time out of that store. No. You buy them 3 at a time out of that store. And then the shard shop currency, you spend 160 currency for 2 of them. So you can, again, forego important gear in order to get them out of there. Or you can, forego some Kairos and get them out of this store. So this is where I recommend you get them.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, especially early on, I do indulge in the Mark Vs and things like that. Really, anything that drops from raids, particularly if your guild's not doing higher level raids, you have a new account, stuff like that. That championship store currency can help propel you, even if you're not looking at Kairos and things like that. But other than that, I totally agree with everything you just said, Lab. Oh, I do sleep on that Mark II pulse modulator, so I should stop that apparently.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Next up is Shard Shop. So this is where I say don't buy GG because it's super expensive.
Yes,
but other than
don't
that,
buy GG.
Yeah. So other than that, yeah, I mean, I tend to prioritize the stuff that you need for D12 finishers out of here. So the med packs and the syringes that I think you need like a couple stacks of 20 of them for a variety of pieces, stuff like that, as well as some of the gold pieces. I'll buy out of here as well as stun guns, carbs, and cuffs for me. I know those can come from a variety of places. Yeah, to be honest, I don't think I ever really buy carbs out of here because Carbounties, you can get them out of the challenges as well as a few other shops. But guns and cuffs, I usually do. What you, Leb?
Yeah, so my philosophy is about efficiency again on this particular store, and the gold pieces, the ones that cost 180 that are used for the G12 gear, you absolutely want to buy from this store. Those are like the armor plating. I think those are the ones that come to mind right now. But yeah, any of the gold pieces that cost 180, those are good. The ones that cost 360, those are your G12 plus pieces. And you want to use your fleet energy to farm those off of the normal nodes. Because the drop rate for those versus the gold pieces that cost 180 is the exact same. So use your energy to buy the more expensive ones. Use your currency to buy the cheaper ones. The med packs, like you said, the Mark 7 syringes and the Mark 8 Nubian scanners, that all are, required for multiple different pieces in the G12 to G13 guild or gear tier. You want to buy those as often as you can. And of course, stun guns, anytime that they show up, are good to buy out of here. The Carbonis and the stun cuffs are not good value relative to other stores, so I don't buy them out of this store. Then there are a couple of other oddball pieces like the Mark 9 implants. Those also show up in guild tokens, but they're okay out of this store. Sometimes if I need them quickly, I'll buy them out of here. And then the Mark 4 back to gels, those are okay out of this shop as well. Again, they're available out of the guild token store, but this one is decent enough value that I'll sometimes splurge and buy them out of here as well.
Yeah. Yep. I think I indulge in those as well once in a while when I need them. Okay, perfect. So that kind of rounds out the stores. Now, there's also ally points that are kind of not. I kind of segregated that out into the end because it doesn't really show up in the same tab structure as the rest of the shipments. But they're out there. They show up in the store that, aside from ally points, everything else in there is either crystals or real money. So you do rack them up for free. So I did want to cover them here too. So ally points. Lab, what's your recommendation on that one?
Yeah, so if as far as efficiency goes, you should exclusively buy the bronziums with ally points. Even if you, as long as you're patient, then you'll get many more stun guns from the ally points from the bronziums than you will if you just buy them out of the weekly shipment tab. However, I do understand that clicking that button 1,000 times every week to rack up the bronziums is annoying. And so for people who are not anal about efficiency, I can understand why they want to buy stuff out of the weekly shipments instead of pushing that button. So as far as efficiency goes, bronziums can't be beat. But I realize that at the end of the day, you play the game for fun, and if you if you don't want to push that button a million times, then don't do it.
Agreed. Yeah, and I totally agree with the efficiency point. I'm very susceptible to not wanting to hit that button a whole bunch of times, so I tend not to. But I do in pockets, and then what I do is I usually keep up a 75K at a given time, just in case there's something good that shows up in the shipments for ally points. And I need to blow through some. If I start creeping up to like 120, 150K, I'll splurge and I'll buy some stun guns or some Cairo or what have you. But absolutely agree that if you have an auto clicker or just a lot of patience to hit a button a bunch of times for 15 minutes, that's definitely the better way to go. You'll get a lot more shard shop currency and useful gear out of there, than otherwise.
Agreed.
Anything I'm missing, Lab? Are there any other currencies you can think of that I'm not thinking of here?
I mean, real dollar bills.
Yeah, I mean, there's the dollar bills, y'all, but
outside of that, no.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, that's going to wrap the episode. Is there anything you wanted to plug or anything you got going on that you wanted to highlight?
Not really. I do have to start my arena climb here in a couple of minutes, so I do have to sign off here fairly quickly. So, other than that, no. I'm just I'm in the grind. I'm trying to build up my Night Sisters right now.
Nice.
I'm about a day away from 7-star Night Sister Spirit, and I'm gonna take her to Relic 7 here within the next week or so, and try shot some fools. So
I saw you starting to upgrade that one.
Yep, pretty excited about that. After that, I'm gonna be a little bit more self-disciplined and start hoarding for whatever is next. But wanted to splurge a little bit on that team, just because it's a fun team. How about you? Anything else? Anything you're doing?
He does break discipline once in a while. He does splurge in things that he likes. Let it be known.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going to be useful in Galactic and Grand Arena Championships too. So,
I mean, an indulgement team for Lab is also like an incredibly useful team. So
that's right. Yes, I don't indulge in Jawas.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm good. The main plug I want to throw out there is we do have Big shout out to The Only Martyr for setting up a Twitter page for us and a Facebook page. So if you go ahead and search for the Senate update on either one of those platforms, we show up. So go ahead and give us a follow there. We'll be promoting, some of our episodes through there, as well as snarky comments here and there, depending on if, I can get my ass on there as well to help out Martyr a little bit. But we'll be using that a little bit more to communicate out new episodes as well as, other content there as well. So give us a follow. Other than that, I think we're good. So y'all have a good day, night, morning, whatever it is that you're listening to us at. And we'll catch you next time. Peace out.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Easy.
All right, bye.